But there was a lot of moments like that when I grew up where the grown-ups would laugh at me. And it was actually, I was a standing joke in the family because my thought process was a bit different. And I've later been told that most of my family thought that I was very, very stupid. So they took care of me, but yeah, sorry. But that was my childhood. But as you know, a fish doesn't understand the concept of water because you've never tried anything else. I did not know that this was not normal. So I got a little bit older and went to school and went to high school. And the thing that really happened to me a lot was that I was very gullible. And I was easy to make fun with because I was very gullible. People could tell me anything and then they laughed at me afterwards. And I thought that, what's wrong with me? Why can't I understand what people are really saying? Why can't I tell when they're lying? Why am I being made such a fool of? And I didn't understand. So life went on, and I became an adult, in a sense. I'm still not 100% an adult. I think many of us will say the same about ourselves. And I noticed that I had what people now call a popcorn brain. I couldn't keep one thought for a long while. It just kept popping. And I didn't understand why this happened. And I thought everybody was like that. So life went on. And I had 3 children. These are my 3 children. My oldest, she's 31. She's got autism and Ph.D. Second child is 24. He's got ADHD. My third child is 21, and he's got ADHD and possibly autism. I don't have a diagnosis myself, but I'm suspecting that I might be a little bit different than normal people. My children taught me a lot about neurodiversity before I even knew they were neurodivergent. Especially my oldest daughter, who taught me how to be a mother, and who taught me that whenever I asked her to do something, I needed her to repeat to me what I just said. And my second child, I needed to touch him to get in contact with him. And the youngest I haven't quite figured out yet, but we're working on it. And it's interesting how my children has taught me so much about being a mother that I didn't know before, and about neurodivergence without even knowing that that was a problem. And then I started working, and I tried having a job, but the popcorn brain just ruined it. And I decided 15 years ago I wanted to have my own company, so I'm very independent, but with all that entails now, and have been for 15 years. And that means that I can have 7 different clients in a day, and that's really nice for me. And in the beginning, I really tried to focus. I went to a coach, I talked to people, and they said, you need to focus on one thing to be good at. You need to focus on one client. Completely impossible for me. I managed to write a book, but it took me 7 years to finish it. So whenever people ask me, how long does it take to write a book? Don't ask me. So I'm not the one to learn from. But that's basically why I think this is important. It's important because when you are neurodivergent, you are living in a place that's created for somebody who's different than you. And we're talking about how wonderful it is, how many superpowers we have as neurodivergent people. But I also really want to say it's a struggle sometimes. But I think awareness is helping us a lot. If my family had been aware of my neurodivergence, my whole childhood wouldn't have been me thinking I was stupid. If I had been aware when I was younger that I cannot read what people are really saying, I would have maybe taken better care of myself. And I have my children to thank for all this, that I've learned all this. And now I can use it as a superpower. I can work with different things. I can learn things quickly. And some of the things from my book is based on the fact that I have learned I've had to learn intellectually to communicate with people. I've had to learn intellectually to figure out, why are people saying this when they mean this? And I think that has given me the facilitation power to be able to try to communicate with people in a way that they really understand me, and to try to really listen to people to see what are they actually meaning when they're saying these things. And one interesting thing that I found was that I have an older person in my immediate family, and whenever we were together, we would always sort of get across with each other. And I didn't understand, because she's a wonderful lady, and I consider myself to be sort of a kind person, but it would always be problematic with us. And I found out, because I've had to think about why I'm talking like I'm talking, why I'm communicating like I'm communicating, that we're just communicating on very different levels, because she is mainly communicating with feelings, and I am mainly communicating with data. To give you an example, we were supposed to go on a walk. I had 3 fairly small children at a time, so my question was, how long is the walk? Because you need to know how much water and snacks to bring, and do we need a pram for some of them? So it's a quite important question to ask, I think. And she said, well, it's about 5 kilometers, metric system, right? I think that's 3.5 miles or something like that. And I said, that's fine. And we went there, and because I like maps, I looked at the map, and I could tell it was 8 kilometers. And I said to her, is that the walk we're taking? And she said, yes. And I said, it's 8 kilometers. And she said, but it's going to be a good walk anyway. And that's sort of the problem with our conversation, that when I said it's 8 kilometers, she took it as a feeling thing, that I was complaining, I don't like the walk, you're lying to me. But I was just being explicit. Well, I'm going on a walk, it's not 5, it's 8 kilometers. That means something to my brain, because when I'm walking, I can't say we're halfway when we walk 2.5 kilometers, because it's going to be really frustrating for me. And I haven't talked to her openly about that, but I talked to my husband about that. And when we are together with said person, we have a little session every evening where we talk about, what did she actually mean when she said that? What was actually the data that she was trying to give to me when she said that thing? And that has helped immensely. So I think the awareness of the different ways that people are talking is quite important. But enough about me. I promised you some tips and tricks about facilitation that we're going to use a little bit later. When I talk to people about communication, mostly in IT companies, I say to them that I hear you say often, I've already said this 3 times. And I try to tell them that saying things is a very, very small part of communication. Because what I've learned is that the first thing that you need is for people to give you attention. They have to actually pay attention to you when you say something, instead of thinking about something else, or looking at their phone. And then you need them to listen. And that can be difficult, because, for instance, if there's not enough psychological safety, they might be thinking about, oh no, what are they going to say now, instead of actually listening? Or they might be thinking, what is a smart answer to this, instead of listening? So listening is also quite an important part of this. And you need to set a stage so that people can listen to you. And then they have to understand it as you understand it, as you wanted them to understand it. And the big problem about understanding is that people's understanding of understanding is so very different. Should I understand it just so that I can say it again? Should I understand it and relate it to something inside myself? Should I understand why she's saying that, or why she wants me to do that? Understanding is quite important. And you can't look at somebody and tell, okay, they understood that. That's something that I've really learned, because I've taught computer science at university for 15 years, and I've also been teaching different courses in industry. And one of the parts of my life was that I was a researcher in how to teach computer science at the University of Computer Science. So I went to a lot of presentations or lectures about computer science, and I would ask the lecturers afterwards, how do you think this lecture went? And they would say, it went really well. And I thought, that's interesting. Because I was sitting in the back row, and my experience was quite different. And I said, so what gave you the impression that it went well? What signs are you looking at? What symptoms do you see? And they said, well, they were all following what I was saying and understanding it. And I said, that's interesting. How do you know that they were understanding it? Because they were nodding all the time. And I thought, But I had been looking at their screens from the back row, and they were doing all sorts of other things. And they were just looking up from time to time and nodding. And I think that out of the 100 people at one of the lectures, there were probably 3 students who were following this lecturer to the end. I think lecturing is the worst way of conveying communication, which is why I'm up here right now doing it, right? But it is really difficult. The next part is, are they accepting what you're saying? Are they accepting that this is what they should do, or this is what they should think, or that this is the truth? Because if they don't accept it, they will just toss it away and forget about it. And the last thing is, are they actually enabled to do what you ask them to do? Are they enabled to think what you're asking them to think? Are they able to put these things together into what they already know? So these are all the different parts that take place in communication. So when people say, I already told them, ask them, did they go through all these parts? Is there something missing?
It's just saying it. I'm looking for the remote control.
Oh, there's nothing that I can do, right?
Keep going.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it was supposed to be a big reveal, the last line there, but I accidentally clicked this to see if that would work with the OK button, because I was thinking about other things. But the last line here is the very important thing.
It's on there.
Yeah. That communication, it's not so much what you are saying, but it's about what the receiver does. That is actually the only thing that's interesting. And when you look at teaching, what used to be relevant was that you read a book and you try to do lectures about the different parts of the book, but now we're more interested in what's the relation between the one listening and the material that you're going through. And I wanted to talk about a few practical things to do when it comes to facilitation and communication in general. One of the things that I am thinking about a lot is the learning preferences from the Felder-Silverman model, where we have active learners and reflective learners. And some people call it the active thinkers and reflective thinkers. And it's more like a spectrum. You can take a test to see where you are. To me, that's not the important part. To me, the important part is that some people need to be active to think. They need to talk, or they need to do something to think, while other people need to reflect to think and be quiet to think. And that is why if you have a plenary discussion in a team, the active thinkers will be talking and talking and talking, and sometimes you can actually tell that they need to talk to think because they really haven't thought through what they're saying before they start saying it. And sometimes you can even see them getting a bit surprised at what they're saying themselves because they hadn't thought it through, and like, oh, I'm reaching this conclusion, that's interesting. And it's not a problem in itself, and you can be on this spectrum either over here at the reflective thinker, over here at the active thinkers, or you can be somewhere along the line. The point is not so much where people are, but the point is to try to make a facilitation environment where we can cater for people no matter where they are on this spectrum. And one of the things that I think really works well is something that I've used a lot in teaching based on Jutta Eckstein, she called it think, pair, share, but it's very much like the 1, 2, 4 all from the liberating structures. Thank you, popcorn brain. And the point is that if you give people some time to think, which we've already seen here numerous times, the reflective thinkers have a chance to think. but then you talk to somebody else that gives the active thinkers a chance to think, and then you can choose to share. That gives the people who do not want to share a chance to not share, or the people who really want to share a chance to share, or speak Danish on stage, or whatever they want to do. So I think the think, pair, share is so crucial, and it's simple, but I'm using it all the time. I'm using it in teaching, I'm using it in facilitation, I'm using it when I'm giving presentations, I'm using it everywhere. Another spectrum is the difference between the global learners and the sequential learners. This is something that I learned about after I had been teaching for 16 years, and when I learned about it, a light bulb just got off in my head, because I thought, this explains everything. I've been teaching for 16 years in this way without even thinking about the people at the other end of the spectrum. So let me tell you about the spectrum. So the global learners are the people who need the framework first in order to take in the details. They need the why, they need the relation, they need the association with other things. I'm very, very much a global thinker. That's why I was most interested in software architecture, design patterns, UML diagrams like that. Not so much in the code snippets. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have the sequential learners, and they really need the details to learn. They read one detail and then another detail, another detail, another detail, and another detail, or concrete examples or something like that. And when I was teaching as a global learner, I would be using UML diagrams to explain the code. And I wouldn't really understand or even respect in the beginning people who needed the code snippets, because who needs the code snippets? But then when I understood this about the difference between the global and the sequential learners, I suddenly thought, that's interesting. And I had already started doing both. So I would have one board with the UML diagrams and one board with the code snippets, because I knew that I needed both. But now I understood why it was. And one of the things that I use this for, the difference between global and sequential thinkers, is, for instance, if people are working in a team, and some people are very much a global thinker and other people are very much a sequential thinker, they sometimes find it very difficult to communicate. But when I tell them about this, they can appreciate, so I need to tell you the why before I do the different details. Or you actually need some details now, otherwise you completely lose interest in this. So what I'm using this for is that when I'm talking about something, I try to set the stage first. I try to make the framework of the house, but I don't spend too much time on that before I go into the different details and put the details in the house. So the takeaway from this talks is three things: that communication takes place in the receiver, and then the think, pair, share, which is like the 1, 2 for all, and then set the stage, but don't forget the details. So those are the things for the sequential thinkers, but then the thought for the global thinker is this quote from Løgstrup: an individual never has to do with another person without holding some of their life in his hand. Or their hand, sorry. But I think that's why I tried to have this quote in the beginning for the global thinkers, to set the stage for why you needed to listen, and then I dived into some details from my life for the people who would otherwise get bored. So thank you for your time so far, and let's get lucky up here.